up the issue of child care, specifically early childhood education and child care under the age of 5. Therefore, it is my intent for today's hearing to give the committee and the legislature more information on what we can do to more efficiently and effectively provide early childhood education and care. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Senator Linehan, and I misspoke. I said 384. Obviously, we're here for LR 349, so thank you for your opening. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you. And we'll invite our first invited testimony from Ms. Melody Hobson. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Sarah Linehan, members of the Revenue Committee. Thank you for the invitation to testify today. My name is Melody Hobson, MELODYHOBSON. I'm the administrator for the Office of Early Childhood Education at the Nebraska Department of Education. The Office of Early Childhood Education includes 3 sections that work to implement state and federal statutes. The first is the Programs and Partnerships section, which is responsible for working with other teams at the NDE to support and monitor early childhood education and care programs and support school districts and educational service units for children from birth through 3rd grade. During the 23-24 school year, 224 out of the state's 245 school districts operated an early childhood program. Additionally, 2 ESUs also operated an early childhood program. 37 school districts currently have an early childhood preschool grant. And those early childhood grants are to prioritize 4-year-olds who are at risk for school failure or poor outcomes. Each November, a request for proposals is available for school districts to either start a program if they don't currently have one, or to add classrooms to the program that they already have. The amount available is for grants is determined after state aid is certified. And the grant applications are approved by panels of early childhood professionals and school administrators from across the state. No reviewer is allowed to review a grant that they either have a personal or professional connection with. All grants are scored according to a rubric, including the needs that are articulated for the local community, the local partnerships, the budget, and the strength of the program description. NDE then recommends a slate of grants for funding, and the applications recommended are then taken to the State Board of Education for approval. The second section of the team is the Step Up to Quality section, and Nebraska Step Up to Quality program is co-administered by the Departments of Health and Human Services and the NDE. Step Up is open to early childhood education and care programs that are either operated by school districts or educational service units, or Head Start programs, or licensed child care and preschool programs for children birth to 5. NDE is responsible for the support and quality improvement activities of the initiative. As of September 5th, there were 1,773 programs that have begun the journey to step up to quality, and there are 876 programs that have achieved a rating. The Step Up section is also taking the lead in processing the attestations necessary for child care providers to receive the school readiness provider tax credit for the 2024 tax year. So far, from July 1st to August 31st, 241 providers have submitted attestations. During the last fiscal year, $83,700 of state dollars was dispersed to licensed child care programs that earned a Step Up to Quality rating of 2 or higher, and approximately $103,000 state funding was used to support scholarships for Step Up to Quality staff who are pursuing higher education. The final section in the Step Up to Quality team is the Early Childhood Training Center. The training center is responsible for managing the state early childhood training infrastructure through what they do at the department, and then through 7 grants that are disseminated across the state to ESUs. Together, they form the infrastructure and the state's resource and referral system. The grants are all paid for with federal CCDF dollars. Now, together with the Training Center, the Early Learning Connection Partnerships do provide training that is locally determined, state required, and federally required. Step Up to Quality does have, sorry, I'm on the wrong section. The Training Center is responsible for approving all the training for licensed child care providers, for Rule 11, and for Step Up to Quality. Office of Early Childhood as a whole is responsible for the creation and the implementation of the Nebraska Early Childhood Professional Record System. As of September 5th, there were 22,593 active users in the system. The office itself is funded with a mix of federal and state dollars. And now finally, for administrative purposes only, the NDE Early Childhood, the NDE is responsible for the Early Childhood Education Endowment Program, which is kind of a mouthful, which is probably why it's now commonly known as sixpence. The constitutional amendment was passed and legislation was enacted to create the endowment. And then per statute, NDE issued a request for proposals for an entity with experience managing public and private funds in multiple locations to be the endowment provider. The endowment provider had to pledge to have $20 million, and the interest off the private endowment was then matched by interest of $40 million in the State Lands and Trust Fund. The successful proposal was submitted by the Nebraska Children and Families Foundation. The Board of Trustees for the endowment is a 6-member board, of which 1 member is the Commissioner of Education or his or her designee, and 1 member is the CEO of the Department of Health and Human Services or his or her designee. The 4 other board members are appointed by the governor, and 2 of them are nominated by the endowment provider, and then the other 2 are professionals who work in different areas of the state. Endowment grants are to serve at-risk children from birth to 3. All grants go to school districts. There are 2 types of grants that are funded with endowment money, and there are center-based programs and home visiting services. Renewal grants are processed through the NDE grants management system. And then additional legislation later enabled federal CCDF money to fund sixpence child care partnership grants. These grants are monitored by DHHS, and then additional information about sixpence programs will be provided by NCFF. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have at this time.
Thank you very much. A lot of information. Are there any questions from the committee? Do you want to talk about any of the other things that you said?
Yeah, I'll tell you what I brought. So the first page, it's a 2-pager, and it has a little bit of the growth of the early childhood programs in the state and then the grant programs, and a little bit about the growth of Step Up to Quality. If you'll notice, it shows the funding for the grant program, and then it shows the districts that are receiving the grants. And then,
I'm sorry, I'm not keeping this with you.
I'm sorry, the first one. I'm hoping that they're all in order.
This one?
So it looks like this. The front looks like this. It's just a 1-pager.
Is it part of the booklet?
No, the booklet is the long program review.
I got it.
Okay, good. I'm glad I could count.
Sorry. Okay.
So it shows kind of the growth for the last probably 12, 13 years of the grant funding and the districts that are receiving the grants. And then it shows the growth of the Step Up to Quality program. And then it shows a little bit about the number of children that are in district and ESU operated programs on the back. The second page.
Okay,
Yes.
can I ask you?
Yeah,
So
sure.
on the back, the number of students that are in district or ESU operating,
Yes,
so what is that number?
that is 20. In the long report, it'll tell you it's 20,000 and some as of the 22-23 school year.
Okay,
It's a little bit more, but we won't have those numbers until after we get all the data from this last year.
so is this mostly 4-year-olds?
It's a mix of 3 and 4-year-olds. It is a majority of them are 4-year-olds. There are a number of 3-year-olds. A number of places will do mixed age groups so that if they have the opportunity to, then those children can, sorry. If they have the opportunity and the space and the staffing, then those kids can have programs for 2 years. But the majority is for 4-year-olds. That is what's prioritized.
And do those 4-year-olds qualify if it's an equalized school? Do they count as 0.6?
Yes. It's equalized at 0.6 if the program operates 1,032 hours a year. So it's prorated down below that if it's like a half-day program.
What if a school's not equalized?
Then if they're not equalized or they're not getting a grant, they're required to operate 12 hours a week. But all of the total numbers of kids, well, if you'd like, we can break it down by grant program or not grant program. And if I spend some time with Bryce, if you'd like, I might be able to give you a little bit more information about the equalized districts and non-equalized districts. That's not something I generally report.
I'm just trying to figure out if it's. Is it more likely if you're equalized, therefore your student count matters? If those 0.6 preschoolers are getting funding that unequalized 0.6 preschoolers would not be getting?
I think that is a true statement. I can't.
Okay. Follow up with Bryce and
Yeah.
that would be helpful. And then it'd be helpful to see how many are in schools that are equalized.
All right. We can do that.
Okay, that was my question on that. Thank you.
The second piece of information is just it's a flyer about 10 years of growth of Step Up to Quality. Yes. And then the third one is 10 years of the Nebraska Early Childhood Professional Record System. And then the very last one is the big packet of information that you have. And that is the most current early childhood education state report. We're beginning to work on the one for 23-24, but again, we have to wait until all the data's in and all the financial things are done.
So, does anybody have questions about this? Because I did read it beforehand. Senator Powell.
Thank you. I don't have a question about that. I actually have a question about, it says you had 1,773 programs that have started the Step Up to
Yes.
Quality program, and 876 have achieved a rating.
Yes.
Is that just a lag and they're making their way through, or did they stop?
It could be either.
Okay,
We don't contact it to find out why they haven't made progress yet,
okay,
but it could be either.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Powell. Other questions from the committee? So on page 3 of the big report,
Yes.
I think staff shared some of this with the report.
That you had some specific, some terminology.
Yes. So it's page 3, talks about Rule 11, down the bottom paragraph here.
Yes.
What is the waiver procedure for staff that do not require requirements of an early childhood teacher?
So the waiver process is the schools need to, if they cannot find a teacher who is certified and endorsed, if they can find a teacher that has a teaching certificate but not yet the endorsement in early childhood, they can teach, but then they need to be working towards it, and then they report the progress in the annual report that they give to us. If they do not have a teaching certificate, then if they can't find someone that has a teaching certificate, then they need to provide us information to show that, yes, they did indeed try to find someone with a teaching certificate. And then they provide the state board the information about, what the qualifications are of somebody that they feel who could do the job, but who does not yet have the certification. And then that information comes to my office. I track it. They have to make sure that they are making progress every year. They have to provide a program of study at a college or university where they're getting their degree. And then every year, if they don't have it finished in the first year, then they have to, the waiver is able to be renewed. And they have to respond and let us know what courses they've taken and their transcripts every year. So the idea is that We may not have somebody who is certified, but yet if they're working towards it, they're actively making an effort, and then we're hopefully growing the field as well.
So do their salaries reflect that they have to be going to college and working on this?
I don't have data about what their salaries are. That's not something that we have asked. There was a lot of discussion when the first waiver process was put into place, so that this would not be something that they would try to underhire purposely. That's why they have to show us that they have made a good faith effort, and these are the people that they interviewed or applied. But we have not specifically asked for compensation.
So my concern would be, and I expect you to have an answer, but if come back later. The concern would be that people want to do this, they don't have a bachelor's degree or certificate, but then they get into it, but because of the pressures of having to pay tuition, and I'm guessing they're not paid very well, they not
Yeah.
meaningfully, but chase people out of the industry.
I think that's a really good observation and a good point. What I have is some anecdotal information. There are places that will put teachers on the teacher salary schedule. Not everybody does. And at this point, we don't have the, ability to, course them, nor would we probably. But we are looking at reviewing the requirements of the waiver, because the state board is also very concerned about, the teacher shortage in general and the teacher shortage in early childhood in particular. So we're going to be looking at both ways that it will simplify the process, but also hopefully support more people, kind of growing their own, so to speak.
On page 4, and I really appreciate this because it's hard to find numbers and budgets. So the funding breakdown, does the state almost 31 million, does that include TIOSA funding?
Yes.
Okay.
Let me get my additional information here.
The federal funding would include, I'm sorry, can you get it?
Okay. Federal funding includes everything that the school district use for early childhood. So it's IDEA funds, SPED funds. There's a little bit of migrant education funding in there. There's a little bit of like food program dollars, things like that. So everything that they use, that they report to us, then is included in the federal dollars, and then the state funds and the state dollars. There are general funds, there are TIOSA dollars, and then there's just a little bit of state SPED flex dollars in there.
So back to the federal funding on the preschoolers, does the federal pick up the same as they do with the K through 12? It's like 23% or 26%.
I cannot specifically answer that. I don't know the SPED funding formula. I can find that out for you, though. I will do that.
And in addition to that, does that mean now that hopefully it means that we're covering 80% of special ed costs, we're covering 80% of special ed costs for preschoolers too?
I will check for you. That is not in my area of expertise.
Okay, that's fine. And the local funding, that includes parents' fees, right?
It does include parent fees. It does include local district
Property
dollars.
taxes.
Yeah.
Where is the 6 pence funding in this?
So in this grant report, we're not, because 6 pence does their own biennial report, we thought it might be more efficient to really focus on the big picture and then focus on the preschool.
So
yeah.
6 pence funding is not.
6 pence funding is not in here. You'll see if you go towards the back, there is some program quality outcomes. So there are some districts that operate an infant toddler program without 6 pence funding. So the program quality data is not 6 pence either.
Okay. Yeah. Finally, I think the last question here, well, actually, maybe not, but the report says that 43% of the children are considered free and reduced lunch, but
Yeah.
isn't the statewide number about 50%? So it's pretty.
So sometimes the data for birth to 5 is really interesting because if you'll notice, and I did not include the state like special education numbers for reference, it's pretty high. Part of that is because special education numbers, a lot of the kids in the birth to 5 program, because we are a birth mandate state and we do serve children in school districts from birth to 5. If many of the
Don't we
children.
have to because of federal law?
We have to serve, well, Part C, but our school districts are responsible for implementing the services. And so many of them will have, since there is this early childhood program that is inclusive, they will, many times the kids and the families and the IEP team determine that the preschool program is where, the school district is where they want their children to go. So that does skew numbers of special education a little bit higher. That also because special education is not a categorical program based on family income. That also, I think, skews that as well.
Correct. Yeah, that makes sense. Do we know the total number of children under 6 in the state of Nebraska? I mean, what we got, I should say staff said 153,390. Does that sound?
That sounds correct, but I don't have it memorized per year.
Okay. Finally, page 13.
Okay. Yes.
On in the blue chart here, it says literacy. So this is a big subject, as you know, with the Department of Education right now.
Yes.
Big grant just came through.
Yes.
So literacy in preschool, will that be also part of the department's efforts through the ESU to make sure that we're doing science of reading in preschool, not self-discovery? Right now there is a literacy group that we're meeting to plan all of that out. I will have to say that that a lot of it has not been determined yet, but we are. But yes, I am absolutely there. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Senator Van Gillen.
Thank you for being here. Just a couple of real quick questions. Since we're in that volume of the report on page 4, there's a comment about funds decreased in 21-22 by 2%. Might that have been because there were extraordinary COVID funds in the year prior? Okay, all right, thank you. Makes perfect
21,
sense.
22, possibly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just easy
Yeah,
question.
there in that one pager, you'll see there was like a big bump in the middle of the, last, decade. Those were one-time lottery funds. Those trickled down, but yeah.
Makes perfect sense. Mirrors a lot of other conversations we have around here.
The other thing would be also that there are kind of a couple of anomalies with the enrollment. I mean, it's gradually grown. School districts don't have to have a reason for operating an early childhood program. Many of them don't get state aid, but they think it is beneficial for their kids. And so while the number of kids have grown, state funding has stayed pretty constant. But you'll notice a little bit that there are a couple of years that we've actually dropped a couple of we don't serve hadn't served quite as many kids. Part of that was the pandemic. So if we're not serving as many kids,
right,
the calculations may not be the same.
Thank you. That makes great sense. And then on the Step Up to Quality handout, the center paragraph there. So Step Up to Quality is Nebraska's quality rating and improvement system designed to assess, improve, and promote the quality of early care and education settings. My question is that it's only with regard to public education settings. Are there private providers that take advantage of Step Up to Quality?
Yeah, the legislation determines that if a program operates for children birth to 5, it can be licensed childcare, licensed preschools, which are within the purview of HHS for monitoring, or school district or ESU operated programs, or Head Start.
Okay, and is that, do you believe that, and I'm sorry that I'm asking for a pretty loose answer, is that widely taken advantage of by or utilized by private providers?
It has increased every year. It's growing. I think it took a while, for the first few years, people were trying to figure out, what it was about. We were trying to, make sure that everybody got the word out. By now, more people are hearing about it. There is always the concern about programs closing. So this is the net growth. There have been more programs that have been a part of it who may have closed, or new ones that are opening. So they're starting back, new ones are starting on the process. So it's hard for me to judge, but yes, it is growing every year.
Very good, thank you, appreciate that.
Thank you, Senator Van Gillen. Senator Cowell.
I had a question on page 12 of that packet, and mostly because I don't know much about this. It's the class observations were completed. When you look at it, it shows that the emotional support was strongest, and then classroom organization. The instructional support was the lowest. Shouldn't that one be the one we're trying to get the most?
So that is something that we work on a lot. But what that will tell you, this is reflective of like nationwide class.
Okay.
It is not an anomaly to Nebraska at all. What we know is that people who seek out jobs working with young children tend to be very nurturing, which is a good thing. They're much better at the social emotional stuff and helping little kids do the good things that they do. We are historically not good. I won't say not good. I would say that it's an improving area where we're really looking at what does it look like to appropriately be an intentional teacher, looking at the areas that are like literacy and math and those cognitive skills that perhaps we have not always historically looked at, but doing that in a developmentally appropriate way. If they would not score well on any of this if we saw 3-year-olds who were sitting doing rote flashcards, because that's not good emotionally, and that's really not good instructional practice either.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
It does, and framing it with the nationwide
I
that
would
makes
say
sense
that
that
is-
that's who's drawn to it, so that's their strongest.
I would say that is by far also the wording of some of the questions that it's assessed on, and the way it is. It is probably a harder domain to really do well at. And I would say that is not even limited to birth to 5. That the class is a tool that is used K-12 too.
Oh, it's used.
There are classes, not widely here, but in some states that they do, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cowell. Are there other questions on committee? Okay, I just want to make sure I don't misunderstand, or you want to clearly understand. When you say flashcards would be detrimental, you're not talking about A is for Apple, those kinds of flashcards.
Wait, no, we're talking about, if you're sitting there and you're expecting kids to sit for 15, 20 minutes when they're 3,
Right.
and we're expecting rote memorization rather than deep learning. What is it? This is an apple. Let's explore the apple. Let's talk about, the how does it feel? How does it smell? How does it look? All of those language inclusive things that you don't get from a picture of a.
Right. So, is there, I can't believe I've never thought of this question before. Is there a group, a list of things a 5-year-old should be able to do in the country?
Yes, it's not, I would not say it's like a bulleted list, but similar. The Nebraska Early Learning Guidelines is the state's, basically is the correlation to state standards for K-12. The Early Learning Guidelines are what we would know and be able to do, kids would be able to do by the time they're 5.
So if I have a 5-year-old and I
Yeah.
had that list.
Look in there, yeah. We don't break it down by 42 months to 48 months, they should be doing this and this and this. But it's, by the time they're 5, these are the things that they should be able to do.
Could you get the committee to copy that?
I would be absolutely happy to.
Other questions? Seeing none, you've been very helpful. Thank you very much. And this report is really good.
Oh, thank you.
So next one step up here, we got 2 votes.
Ms. Shannon Roach. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. Good afternoon, Chairwoman Linehan and members of the Revenue Committee. My name is Shannon Grotrian, SHANNON, and I'm the Director of the Office of Economic Assistance with the Department of Health and Human Services. I am here today to testify on LR 349. The Department of Health and Human Services has been investing in early childhood education for decades. However, the Child Care and Development Block Grant, CCDBG Act of 1990 was the first opportunity to provide significant federal funding for improving child care and early childhood education. CCDBG requires that 9% of federal funding go towards quality initiatives within the state. The remaining funds can be utilized to support children and their families by paying for child care that will fit their needs, regardless if it is a public, private, or in-home provider, and prepares them to succeed in school. In 1990, the Nebraska State Legislature created the Early Childhood Program Training Fund to enhance, provide, and coordinate training with the Nebraska Department of Education. The department's efforts and funding have increased since that time to include the Child Care Development Fund, also known as CCDF, which partners with the Nebraska Department of Education to provide early childhood training and education to providers. In 1997, the legislature enacted legislation to begin providing individual grants to child care providers for no more than $10,000 to improve the quality of their program or increase capacity for early childhood spots. In 2013, the Nebraska State Legislature created the Step Up to Quality Child Care Act, which required that 5% of the CCDF quality dollars be allocated to Nebraska's Quality Rating and Improvement System. The program was created to provide a path to higher quality for early childhood education programs, requiring the department to provide funding to the Step Up to Quality program co-administered by DHHS and the Nebraska Department of Education. In 2015, the legislature enacted legislation to allocate 3% of CCDF funds towards Sixpence Child Care Partnerships, which is administered by the Nebraska Children and Families Foundation. Sixpence partners work with child care providers to improve school readiness and education outcomes of infants and toddlers. In 2018, Nebraska was awarded $4.1 million in federal funding through an initial preschool development grant, often referred to as the PDG, to support early childhood services for children birth to age 5. In 2020, Nebraska was awarded an additional $8.9 million each year for 3 years to continue the support for early childhood services. Currently, an application is pending with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Office of Child Care, Administration of Children and Families for an additional $21 million in PDG funds to continue these activities over the next 3 years. One of the activities that is funded through the PDG grant is Communities for Kids, which is an initiative that helps support and strengthen the child care workforce and address child care shortages. DHHS strives to ensure low-income children and families have access to quality child care in Nebraska and is proud to be one of 22 states that does not waitlist children for child care subsidy. CCDBG, TANF, and state funds are utilized to assist families with the cost of child care based on eligibility requirements, including income limits and the need for care. The child care subsidy program is typically used for children up to and including 12 years of age. However, a child may receive services up to the age of 19 if that child has special needs. Families are able to maintain employment in addition to engage in employment training or education while ensuring their children are cared for in an appropriate child care setting. Pandemic funding assisted providers across the state with over $300 million in grant opportunities to increase both capacity and quality, as well as ensure providers are able to continue to provide child care to low-income families. As of September 30th, 2024, these pandemic funds will be fully spent and will no longer be available. In 2021, LB 485 increased the initial eligibility requirements for childcare subsidy. The increased costs associated with this bill were paid for by pandemic funding. The increased eligibility will continue through September 30th, 2026, and there's no additional pandemic funding available to cover the cost of these increases. The increase will need to be paid for through CCDF funds effective October 1st, 2024. In 2024, the legislature enacted legislation allowing childcare providers who are determined eligible for childcare subsidy to receive services for their children within the childcare that they are employed. Providers must make reasonable efforts to find a childcare in which they are not the primary caregiver while their children are in care, but they may receive childcare subsidy if they are unable to do so. In March 2024, ACF announced a new federal rule intended to lower costs for families that receive childcare subsidies, change payment practices to childcare providers, and increase childcare options for families. The department is actively working to implement the final rule and estimates that it will be implemented by August 2026. I want to thank Senator Linehan and the Revenue Committee for the opportunity to testify today. GHHS remains committed to addressing the child care crisis and making efforts to address the needs of children and families across the state. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for being here. Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Kelly.
Thank you, Senator Linehan. In the paragraph that starts in 2021 about LB 485,
Yes.
it says it increased the initial eligibility requirements. Wouldn't that mean it would make it harder to get in? So, and it talks about increased costs for doing that.
No, I mean, what it did was it took initial eligibility from 130% of the federal poverty level to 185. So
Got it.
more
So it
individuals were
increased,
eligible.
okay. And so that was because of the pandemic?
It was during the pandemic that it was legislation.
Oh, okay. It was during it, but was the increase because of the pandemic? Because more people needed childcare? Because you're saying the increase will need to be paid through CCDF funds.
Yep.
So you're going to continue paying for it rather than decreasing the eligibility back.
Right, because it doesn't
Okay.
sunset until,
Okay, it has a sunset
Yeah,
on it. Okay.
right. It does.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kelly. Are there other questions from the committee? Pandemic funding assisted providers across the state with over 300 million in grant opportunities. Do you have a breakdown of where that 300 million went?
I could provide that to you.
Okay, I think the committee would like to see that. So one of my, and I've said this before, and I'll say it maybe more than one state. What I'm trying to figure out, and I can't remember it's what report I read. We have a lot of people with lots of different strands of money,
Mhm.
going lots of different places.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to figure out how much money are we spending on, how much money are you spending that's not actually going to take care of kids? I mean, I know all of it takes care of kids, but I mean, let's say out of this $300 million,
Mhm.
how much of that actually went to people who take care of kids?
To the childcare providers.
The providers, their employees, or their employees. I'm talking about the people that they talked about before that want to take
Yeah.
care of babies and little
Mhm.
kids.
Yep.
Maybe they're not so good with the flashcards or whatever, but they're there like at 7 o'clock in the morning, work until 6 o'clock at night.
Mhm.
How much of this money, out of that 300 million, went to them?
Yeah, we can get you that breakdown. Some of the grant opportunities went to the providers to help stabilize the business. Some of the grant opportunities went directly to the workforce. So we provided stipends. We provided some funds to help with the workforce's student loan debt. So I can get you that breakdown between the two.
And then, out of the HHS, out of your budget that you set aside for early childcare, how much of it actually ends up going to the providers and employees?
To the providers and the.
And that would include stipends to parents for
Okay.
paying it, right?
Mhm.
Because, and then not in here, I'm hoping Senator Poster will ask a question. Not in here is any of the tax credits we did last year, because that's not HHS.
Right.
it's
Yep.
Department of Revenue,
Yes.
but that would be another 25 million.
Sarah Bostrad, you have a question?
Yes.
You go ahead, though.
So yeah, my understanding is that it would be the 35 million spread out over to the providers, to families, to the educators, and then the resources for developing new childcare options as well. But those all, because it's the structures of tax credit, those go straight out to the recipients.
So they don't go through HHS or
No.
NDE, they go to people who are actually on the ground.
Yes, through the income tax filing process.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from the committee? I see none. Thank you very much. Thank you. Mr. Josh Kramer, Executive Vice President, Sixpence, and is a Senior Vice President of Nebraska Children's and Families Foundation. Make sure you better- Good afternoon.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
I can.
I've never been the quiet kid, so.
Okay, good.
So Chair Linehan and members of the Revenue Committee, thank you so much for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Joshua Kramer, spelled Joshua-Kramer. I have the opportunity to serve as the Executive Vice President at the Nebraska Children and Families Foundation, where I oversee the organization's early childhood programs, in addition to some other things, including the administration of the Nebraska Early Learning Endowment Fund, more commonly known as Sixpence. I greatly appreciate Chair Linehan's leadership on this issue and thank the committee for taking the time to learn about early childhood. According to the U.S. Department of Education, 90% of the human brain's capacity is developed by age 5. This development is the result of complex interactions between babies and those caring adults in their lives. To ensure that this period of rapid brain development is maximized for all Nebraskans, it is important that we focus on broad-based access to high-quality early childhood care and education. I received that kind of early childhood education in Hastings, and I've spent most of my career making sure that others have that same opportunity. I'm proud to say that at NCFF, we work with public and private partners to leverage resources and build robust programs that help augment investments in early care and education so that our state's youngest members and their families can reach their full potential and contribute to our state economy. With my limited time, I'm going to highlight a couple of these powerful programs. One's already been mentioned today. That's Communities for Kids, or C4K, as we refer to it as, was created in response to community requests for assistance with shortages of early child care programs. This program, which focuses primarily on rural areas, provides training and technical assistance to communities so they can work to implement a plan to address their child care shortages. To date, NCFF and C4K has helped secure 3,000 new child care slots across 70 communities in 57 counties. There's a handout in that pile that we can talk about or you can look at for more details. Additionally, for nearly 16 years, NCFF has provided training, technical assistance, and evaluation services for Sixpence grants on behalf of the Nebraska Department of Education. These grants have helped sustain community partnerships and deliver high-quality early care and learning opportunities for over 6,000 of our most vulnerable infants and toddlers. Sixpence provides funding and technical assistance through a competitive grant process, enabling locally controlled partnerships to offer parent coaching and child care services to families most in need. Sixpence provides these supports under the guidance of a governor-appointed board of trustees, as well as a team of experts in early education, program administration, and grant management. The reason Sixpence is successful is because it unites public and private sector resources at the state and local level and ensures quality and accountability for every dollar we invest to help communities address their specific early child care needs. Every year, the Monroe Meyer Institute at the University of Nebraska Medical Center evaluates the progress of children served by the Sixpence program. You can find those results in the biennial report that we provided as well. And in terms of family literacy and early literacy, we are proud to report that 800,000 books are in the process of being delivered to more than 33,000 children across Nebraska in concert with training and technical assistance around interactive, intergenerational literacy strategies that connect home, school, and community. This is known as Nebraska Growing Readers, and it builds momentum around what Sixpence has done for years now. Creating a scholarly culture in the home with an abundance of books and interactive intergenerational reading activities will pay dividends in future academic achievement and life success. We were excited to have First Lady Pillen and Commissioner Maher join us for the launch of that program last October. I think that Nebraska is at a critical juncture. Personally, now more than ever, we need to find innovative solutions to address the most urgent challenges facing our youngest children, their families, child care providers, and other members of the early childhood workforce. Thank you again for your service on behalf of Nebraska children and families. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much. Other questions from the committee? Senator Kellogg.
Thank you, Chair Linehan. Who are the private partnerships? Private donors, yeah.
We work with all sorts of private partners. We take private funds as a 501c3 nonprofit from all different kinds of foundations, individuals, and people who want to give money to our organization.
Are there any big, the larger foundations that tend to operate within Omaha or Lincoln?
We have funding from foundations that operate in Omaha and Lincoln.
Okay. And then do you guys have lobbyists? And I guess what I'm asking is how much of the money is actually spent doing the job versus how much is spent finding the money to do the job?
Sure. In reference to Sixpence?
Yeah.
So in reference to Sixpence, we do not fund any lobbyists at all. And it's a complex funding formula that you could look at. If you want me to try to explain it, I will. It's not my complete area of expertise, but it combines a private endowment that we oversee at the foundation, and then there's a public endowment, as you know, that's overseen at the state level. And then there are public funds that come into Sixpence, and of those roughly 10 million or 10 million plus funds that go out, roughly we think, or based on our calculations, about 95% of those go to communities directly. And the Nebraska Children and Families Foundation uses a little less than 7% to do the training, technical assistance, and evaluation. The good news about that, in our opinion, is that's less than we could be spending. And so we're trying to strike a balance between being effective at supporting program quality and not also spending too much money that doesn't go out to communities.
And then, so that's for Sixpence. And then for the Nebraska Children and Families Foundation, kind of the same question. Do you guys use lobbyists? How do you secure your donations?
Yes. So the way that our funding works, 46% comes at the Nebraska Children and Families Foundation broadly. 46% comes from public or state funds. 43% comes from private, which, as I've shared, is a mixed bag of local, national foundations, individual contributions. 8% comes from public or other public, which are really municipalities that have worked with us to do different things across the lifespan. And then 3% come from federal. And our indirect costs, or what we spend that doesn't go directly to communities or the families we serve, is right around 6.7% for state funds, which is pretty reasonable compared to other nonprofits based on my experience. Mm-hmm. And we do have 6 registered lobbyists in our organization. We could spend to, based on our IRS designation, up to $1 million a year on lobbying. And I think our number so far this year is about 60,000.
Excellent. Thank you.
And those are all undesignated funds.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kellogg. Senator Reinbold.
Not the toughest question you're going to get asked today. Where does the name Sixpence come from?
Well, it's that nursery rhyme, and I was going to study that before I came, but
I'm familiar with the C.S. Lewis story. Is that the basis?
I think so, yes.
Okay, all right. I glanced at your website quickly. I'm just kind of curious. So, thank you.
Thank you. It's actually on one of the things I read.
Oh, is it? Okay, thanks.
I can't remember which one it is. I was going to ask questions about your budget too. How much did you say state spending?
For the Nebraska children budget or for Sixpence? Okay, so do you want me to start with, well, I'll start with the NCFF wide, we have 46% public and state funds.
When you say public and state funds, is it comes from the legislature? What's public and state funds? I don't.
It can come from the legislature. It can also come from competitive RFP processes.
Through the Department of Health and Human Services or the Department of Education.
Any department that offers a competitive RFP.
Do you get direct appropriations from the legislature?
Not to my knowledge, but we can get back to you on that. I've not seen that.
Okay. I read your report. It's great. I do have some questions. It's the one, the 2022 one. So on page 3, and you handed this out, so everybody got it, don't you?
Everybody's got it.
Yeah, so on page 3, and I have lawyers, so I might not understand something. So it's supposed to have public sector, private sector, and early childhood specialists on your board of trustees. So how does, and I just wonder, and I'm sure she's wonderful, she might even be here, solid here. How does the University of Nebraska Lincoln employee fit under private sector?
That would be a question for, it's a gubernatorial appointed board, so they would have been given that designation in the appointment process.
Okay,
I could probably get you more details, but I don't have
but
them
it
with
is
me.
supposed to be public, private, and specialist.
Yes.
The last paragraph on, and I think you may have answered this, but page 5. Last paragraph, excuse me, talks about 11 grants for family engagement and center-based programs. Where does that go? The bill appropriates in addition, under the leadership of the Appropriations Committee Chair John Stinner, Nebraska Legislature passed LB 342 to help offset the impact of the pandemic on children's early development. So this would have been more over the 300 million that came from the federal. That's different, I'm sorry, that's Department of Ed. And then for HHS, the bill appropriates an additional 2.5 million for 2 years to reinforce the workforce expense, leading to 11 new grants for family engagement and center-based programs throughout the state. Is there a way to get where that went?
Yes, those funds would have gone out in the form of grants. They were distributed, I believe, by the Department of Education.
But you could provide where they went?
Yeah.
Okay. On page 6. Again, the last paragraph, which is invest in quality. Nebraska should expect accountability for public and private resources we commit to developing our children. We can assure you those resources are being used responsibly, investing strategically in high-quality programs that show positive outcomes for children, family, and communities. So who's the judge of the high quality?
Sure. So I would say that there's 2 levels. So you heard about Step Up to Quality from our state partner, NDE. And so part of this is encouraging providers to move up along that scale. For us, as the training technical assistance and evaluation provider, we have our own continuous quality impact standards that we keep and we've developed over the last 16 years based on our research and practice. And so we have benchmarks that are looked at on a regular basis from our TA officials that go across the state. It is not a punitive model. We like to think that we catch people doing good things for children and families. And so we're always trying to move them along those quality indicators.
So, because I think one of the reports I read might be the action agenda for early childhood. And this might not be a question for you, but maybe somebody who's going behind you. One of the difficulties for parents is all the different, where you go for help and who can provide that help. And so is your plan going forward is to be more coordinated? Is that, were you involved with this? It looked like almost everybody was involved, but
Yes.
the early action agenda.
Yeah, the action agenda is really a wonderful work product that has come about after all these years of having the preschool development grant that was explained by our colleagues from DHHS. We are trying to become more integrated and coordinated. That's the intent of the grant. And should we receive the next grant, hopefully we'll find out later this month, we will begin to execute that action agenda, which brings us all together.
So who will be the lead in that action agenda?
That'll be determined by the Department of Health and Human Services, should the grant be awarded.
And then does Sixpence have a budget that's publicly available?
The public endowment and the public funds that go to sixpence would be publicly available. As far as the private endowment is concerned, we hold that at the foundation, and I could definitely get with our CFO to talk about what
I'm
questions
just
you have.
interested in the public part.
Okay.
So what is the budget? Because it's money that was 40 million from the state, 20 million from private, right? That started this. So what does that generate as far as funding every year?
Yes. Well, I can give you an update for this year. For history, we would have to come back to you with more information. But as of June 30th, in the public endowment, the funding that we are aware of is 66.9 million. And throughout the year, they will distribute 2.06 million that will go out primarily in the form of grants to communities. That's combined with the state general fund of about 7.5 million this year. And then again, we add private endowment resources to that to make this the most robust public-private partnership we can.
The 66.9 million is the total fund on the state side?
In the public endowment.
Okay, so you can't spend all of it. You can just take
No.
interest on it.
No, and that's monitored by the Department of Education. Actually, I wrote this down, your Nebraska Investment Council monitors that.
So you get from that the interest. So it's not 66.9 million. It's whatever the investment council generates with that 66.9 million.
Right, which this year we think will be 2.06 million. And that doesn't come to us, that mostly goes to communities in the form of grants.
Okay, so here's a question I would like to take back, and maybe somebody here knows. If it was started with 40 million, which I think is what the original grant was, why is it now sitting on 66.9 million? If the money's supposed to be used for programs?
I think that's a good question.
I would like to. Are there, oh, hello, Senator.
Sorry about that.
Any other questions from Senator Cow?
Just one more. Can you tell me on the sixpence growth map, just tell me the differences between home-based, center-based, and childcare partnership?
I can tell you the difference in those three things. So those are the three different grant programs that,
Excuse me, where are you at?
This chart right here,
Is it in the book?
it was.
it's a separate leaf. It looks like this.
Okay. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay.
So Sixpence has three grant opportunities for local school districts. It is a center-based model, a home-based model, and a child care partnership model. The center-based model is as it sounds. It usually happens at the school. It requires 100% match from the local community. And so it's a great way to match some state and public and private funds and bring them all together. The home-based program involves parent goal setting, interactive learning activities with parents and children, and can happen in the home through voluntary home visitation. And then finally, the child care partnership comes to us, as my colleague explained, from the Department of Health and Human Services, goes through school districts and supports private providers and communities and tries to increase quality. So connecting to the quality discussion earlier, this is where we're encouraging growth in the step up to quality process, and also continuous quality improvement from our side of the training and technical assistance.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cal. Senator Von Gillen.
Yeah, thank you again for being here today. To the question Senator Linehan asked a little bit ago, you started out with a $40 million investment or corpus in that foundation. What are you allowed to peel off of that each year?
For the public part?
Yeah, to get to your $2 million that you're getting to now, are the terms of the foundation, I don't know, agreement or whatever you call it, does it say you can peel off 2%, 4%, 6%?
Yes, I don't think I can speak to the public component of that. I can speak to our private endowment, but that's information I'd have to bring back
No,
to you.
that's fine, that's fine. So is it possible that the 40, if you're only allowed to peel off so much, that 40 million within that corpus could have grown to 60 million in value, is that?
Correct.
But you aren't able to peel all that out because you're only able to take so much out per year?
Yes, and we at the foundation don't have control of that. That's managed by the Nebraska Investment Council.
Okay.
So it's really beyond our scope.
Okay, so to Senator Linehan's question, it'd be helpful to know if that's what, for lack of a better term, maybe has tied your hands about how much you can take out of that. And then there's an obvious, maybe a good outcome of that, and that is that balance continues to grow and continues to peel off additional revenue that you can put into the program. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator McMillan. Other questions from the committee? If it was under the control of the,
Investment Council.
thank you, investment council, then we might have some ability to actually address. Because see, I mean, I'm all for endowments, it's great to save money, but now when you get needs that aren't getting that. Like, I don't think they probably, the state probably put 40 million in there so we could get to 60 million, probably put 40 million in there, so it's also a problem. But anyhow, help us figure that out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have Jennifer. Now I'll let you pronounce your name. No, I tried before, I know.
It's fine. Don't try it.
I've been in Linehan a lot, so, you know. Okay. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Linehan, members of the Revenue Committee. Thank you for allowing me to testify today, and also for the early childhood tax credits you recently passed. My name is Jen Guttemuller Wendell. That's spelled JenGoetteMoeller. Then there's a space, Wendl. I am an early childhood financing consultant for First 5 Nebraska, and I'm here representing them today. The topic of early childhood funding is one I have spent several years studying, and I appreciate your interest in it. I'm going to try to keep things simple, and I've also tried to keep track of some of the questions that I've heard that I may be able to help shed some light on as well. So I'm going to try to give you three things today, just a little bit of data, some information on how the early childhood system in Nebraska is funded, and then also some suggestions for your consideration. So first off, data, there's some handouts going around, included in my written testimony is a statewide summary of the early education needs in Nebraska. It's got some important highlights on there. There are an estimated 151,757 children under the age of 6 in Nebraska, I think to your question earlier, Senator Linehan. And 74% of those children, again, who are not yet school age, live in households with all available parents in the workforce. Licensed childcare participating in Step Up to Quality. Someone over here asked that earlier. And while I'm on the topic of data, I will just point out that that is also listed on the back of the overview that looks like this. And to Senator Von Giller's point about private programs being able to really take advantage of or access the resources that are available through Step Up to Quality. You'll see there that licensed programs participating in Step Up to Quality, 29.4% of our licensed childcare.
Which page?
This one? It's on the
Thank you.
back.
Got it, thank you.
Yep. So those would be, largely private programs. These are not public programs, right? These are private. These are your family childcare homes back home in your district that are able to access the resources and services that are available in Step Up to Quality. I want to mention one other data point that I think is really important, especially if you're not very familiar with it, although you may have heard some things anecdotally back in your district. So we have some recent data from the state's childcare roster that's been analyzed by First 5 Nebraska that gives us some insight about childcare providers across the state. So for Douglas, Lancaster, and Sarpy counties, we have seen that childcare centers decreased by 2.4% after COVID, but have slowly rebounded to pre-COVID numbers. Again, that's for Douglas, Lancaster, and Sarpy County, and those are childcare centers. When it comes to family childcare homes, again, this is Douglas, Lancaster, Sarpy, those home providers have actually decreased since 2019, gradually, steadily decreasing. We have not seen any type of a rebound yet. There's a 22% reduction in family childcare home providers since 2019 in the Douglas, Lancaster, and Sarpy County areas. So in greater Nebraska, did you want to ask a question, Sarah Linehan?
I'm sorry to do this to you, but
Sure,
we're
no
not on
problem.
the timers thing here.
Yeah, no problem.
On the 22% reduction in family care, are those licensed or just all?
Licensed family home childcare providers that are
Okay.
licensed through DHHS.
So we don't have visibility on grandma takes care of grandson?
True, correct.
Okay,
Yep, that number is just not collected anywhere.
okay, all right,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt, go ahead.
No problem. So then in greater Nebraska, we saw kind of the same thing. Childcare centers decreased after COVID by 1.4%. Those have rebounded as well and actually increased by about 3%. But the family childcare home story is similar to the metro areas. That number has decreased since 2019. There's a 15% reduction in family home providers in greater Nebraska since 2019. Again, just slowly, steadily going down each year, not recovering yet at this point at all. Additionally, Nebraska has 10 counties that are considered childcare deserts. These are counties that do not even have one licensed childcare provider in them. And I will just say, just having one licensed childcare provider doesn't mean there's sufficient capacity for all parents who need childcare for their children, right? That's a different conversation. But if you at least have one in your county somewhere, you're not considered a childcare desert. But we have 10 counties that are those childcare deserts. They are Arthur, Banner, Blaine, Hayes, Hitchcock, Kipaha, Logan, McPherson, Sioux, and Thomas. So there's lots of data that a lot of people have, and you already have quite a bit in front of you. What I will just say is the data is very clear that we have an enormous need for childcare, and we know it's needed everywhere, not just the metro areas. We really have come to a breaking point, and if we want to see economic growth in Nebraska, we have to address the childcare crisis. So then second, you've got an additional document that is a summary of state funds invested in our early care and education system. So hopefully this will be helpful to kind of see some things all in one place here. And this document is really intended to help answer item number 1 that you had listed in the LR. Yep, you got it. So you'll find a brief description of each state funding source. And let me quickly just walk you through the first one listed. The Child Care and Development Fund, CCDF, which you heard about earlier from HHS, subsidizes the cost of childcare for low-income working parents. To qualify for the program, parents must meet income and work requirements. Payments are made directly from the department straight to the provider. No payments are ever made to the family. And then Senator Linehan, I know that you have an interest in understanding how revenues are sourced. Those details are not actually in that handout. So I was thinking, if you didn't mind me taking the time, I was going to quickly just mention each one of them to you. So for CCDF, authorization of funds for CCDF actually originates from 4 sources. 3 of those are federal. So the first one is discretionary funding that was authorized by the Child Care and Development Block Grant Act, which Shannon mentioned. It's a federal source of funds and it's subject to annual appropriation.
By the feds.
Correct. Number 2 is mandatory and matching funds that are actually made available under Section 418 of the Social Security Act. So obviously those are also federal funds. The third source is state maintenance of effort and matching funds. This is the portion a state is required to invest in order to access those federal funds. And then the fourth source are federal funds that can be transferred to CCDF from a state's Temporary Assistance to Needy Families Block Grant, which is TANF. This is optional. States don't have to do that. Nebraska always has. So then the second one listed there is the Early Childhood Calculated State Aid, which is, of course, a part of TIOSA. These dollars are part of the TIOSA calculation. I do want to point out, Senator Linehan, you brought this point up earlier, that while early childhood funds are calculated for every school district, only equalized schools actually receive the early childhood calculated state aid. When I started this work, I would say about 70% of schools were equalized. You know what that number looks like now? We're maybe at about 30% or so. So again, that Early childhood calculated state aid is actually calculated for each school district, but some school districts are not able to receive that. So then we have sixpence, the Early Childhood Education Endowment Fund, also known as sixpence. Sixpence also has 4 sources of revenue, and Josh did a great job telling you about those. The first source is that investment of $40 million from education lands and funds, right? The second source is the $20 million private match that was invested. The earnings off of these investments are combined, go into the cash fund. That's what goes out as grants. That is how Sixpence started. And actually, to Senator Von Gittelern's point about the name, I was actually able to be a part of that branding effort. And it was actually ultimately a fundraising effort on the part of trying to attract more private donors. So the message there was that if a private donor put up $1, the state match was $2, right? And then Sixpence requires a 100% local match. So that $1 becomes $3 when you put the public piece in. And then with the local match, that $3 becomes $6. And so it kind of was a fundraising mechanism. And also, of course, conjures delightful memories for all of us about reading to our kids and singing nursery rhymes when they were young. So that's where the name came from. So then, still on Sixpence, as the legislature took interest in this public-private partnership, Senator Linehan, you asked this just a moment ago about Chairman Stinner and that bill. So general funds were later added in 2013 was the first year. As a third source of revenue, those funds also go directly to the cash fund. And again, that's what's distributed as grants. And then as was mentioned.
That's an ongoing appropriation?
Yes.
Okay.
And then the fourth source Nebraska utilizes, and Shannon brought this up as well, utilizes a small percentage of federal CCDF funds to fund partnerships between school districts and the local child care providers. Those started in 2015. And if you haven't seen a Sixpence program, you should connect with Josh and go see one because they are incredible. And if you've seen one Sixpence program, you've only seen one. They do not all look the same. They are very locally driven and they are a model for the entire country. There are a lot of states watching the Sixpence program. Okay, so next on your handout is the Nebraska Early Childhood Grant Program that serves children 3 to 5 years old. Funds for these grants are appropriated by the legislature each year. So I'm going to mention something, just a little bit of a history note. There was a time when a very small amount of lottery funds were allocated by the legislature to both the Early Childhood Education Endowment for infants and toddlers, Sixpence, and also to the grant program, primarily to avoid a general fund cut to the grant program during a really difficult budget time. No lottery funds have since gone to either of those programs, but I did just want to give you that historical reference. That was for the 5-year period FY12 through FY16. And then Nurturing Healthy Behaviors is another public-private partnership. The public funds come from a general fund appropriation by the legislature. And then the last one on there, scholarships and bonuses. This is the $169,000 general fund appropriation by the legislature. So given the LR's focus on state funds, I didn't list any federal funds in this handout. If that's helpful, I certainly can. I will point out that federal funds make up about 60% of all the public funds in our system. State funds make up the remaining 40%.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Federal funds make up about 60% of the public investment in our early care and education system here in Nebraska. And state makes up the other 40% of public funds. Of course, not all the funds in the system come from public sources, right? Most come from parents paying for childcare privately. And we know a lot of churches, nonprofits, businesses, banks subsidize childcare as well. So you'll also see the 3 tax credits recently passed on the handout, and then the FY23 amount of each investment is listed in that funding table in there as well.
Thank you.
Yep. So The last thing I just want to leave you with are a couple of considerations as you and your colleagues in other committees even. For a moment, I felt like I was having education committee type of conversations, but really, really appreciate your interest in this. It's very, very important. So the business model for childcare is actually constrained by something that we call the iron triangle. Given the high prices that parents pay for childcare, it's often assumed that childcare programs must be very profitable. But that is hardly ever the case. Two childcare business analysts coined a concept called the iron triangle, which describes 3 key metrics of financial viability for childcare programs. The first is full enrollment every day in every setting or classroom that you run, 100%. Number 2 is that the provider must collect tuition and fees both in full and on time. And the third is that they must collect revenue that covers the per child cost. And all 3 of these metrics have to be met in order for childcare to be financially viable, which is really bad news for childcare providers because it is impossible to keep 100% enrollment every day. Those tuition and fees are not going to be paid in full and on time every single time. Think of the home provider, right? We all know each other in Nebraska communities. Think of the home provider whose daughters go to school together with a family that she's caring for. And the provider knows that the family had their lights shut off for a couple of days last week, right? Is that provider going to say, better pay me in full on time? They know each other and they're just probably going to kind of let it slide, take it late, maybe not even take the full price, right? But it has major impacts on the stability of their budget, okay? And unfortunately, the child care subsidy pays for childcare not based on cost, but based on other factors, which perpetuates a skewed and broken system. And the result is absolutely crippling for childcare providers. So I just wanted to leave you with that. A second point, stabilizing and sustaining childcare does require a model that works for Nebraska. We've got the recent efforts around tax credits, innovative funding models that leverage both public and private dollars that have already proven their effectiveness. We have some good things to build on. There are some other ways that we can address stability for providers though as well. We can determine where the largest losses are. And based on what I know, I'm gonna suggest that we look at providers who care for infants and also those in rural Nebraska. We can keep subsidy rates at pace with the actual costs of care. We can allow non-equalized school districts to receive early childhood calculated state aid. There are a lot of ways that the state can move some levers to support providers. And one of our greatest strengths is our community-based solutions. This has always been the case, especially in early childhood. So even though we need to address the childcare crisis at a systems level, we can't overlook the power of those community-based solutions. Some of the most creative and promising efforts are coming out of Nebraska communities. So you've heard a little bit about Sixpence, Communities for Kids. They're great examples to address the childcare shortages and the other issues that we have across our local communities. Local match and community participation are very often key components of these programs. And our Nebraska communities are doing great things and can do more great things when leveraging public funds with community buy-in from local and private sources. So I just wanted to thank you again for the opportunity. Thank you, Senator Linehan, for giving this critical issue increased attention. I've taken a lot of your time, but I hope the information is helpful. Please let me know how I can support your efforts further.
It is, are there questions from, yes, Senator Boster and then Senator Von Gilman.
Thank you, Chair Linehan. Thank you for being here. Sort of the disparity in either decline or recovery, right, of providers, the disparity between the big 3 counties versus greater Nebraska. Is there any, why is that happening? It's almost counter to what would be expected, where I would have imagined the more urban areas growing and recovering faster than the rural places, but it's the opposite. And so what do we think that is primarily driven by?
So I think, especially in if you're talking about the reduction in family care, in particular, family child care homes, which we see all across the state and very heavy in the metro areas, I think it's an indication that we have systemic financing issues. Right, and they kind of go back to the iron triangle, and there are some things to unpack there. We have a really great new tool in Nebraska that was actually developed in very close partnership with the Department of Health and Human Services called the Child Care Cost Model. And it does actually estimate what it costs a provider. It takes into account all of the expenses that they have to incur in order to provide care. And that's a really helpful tool. But again, I think we have, in seeing the numbers decline, it's an indication that we have systemic financing issues across our system that we really have to be, serious about addressing. It also has implications for, the choices that family have really when they're choosing the program in their community that's going to work for them. And yeah, I just think our family home providers are a very, very important part of the system. So.
Senator Von Gillen, then Senator Kaplan.
Yeah.
Thank you, Senator.
Great segue. Good question. I'm going to continue that to even a little bit more 30,000 foot question that I'm going to arrive at here in a second. The iron triangle that you described basically applies to every business.
Absolutely.
Yes,
thank
you.
you.
Have sales, you have to
Thank
collect
you.
what's due to you, and you have to stay profitable.
If I'm going to meet you for
Yeah.
coffee in your district, that coffee shop is
Right.
basing their prices off of.
So
Yeah.
I came from the construction industry, and years before me, there was a revelation within our industry that most of the people that became contractors came out of the trades. And the failure rate was very, very high within the contracting industry at that time. So that led to the development of programs at the various universities, which I attended one here in construction management, which was basically about half engineering and half business programs. And those programs across the country have led to an increased success rate within maybe I could frame it differently, a much lower failure rate within the construction industry for contractors. So my question is, what is the educational background for most providers, and is there a way, and you just described part of it at the end of your last response to Senator Bostard. It sounds like you're already starting to lean in that direction. Are there ways that these providers, is there a way to come alongside them and educate them in solid business practices? Are there educational programs that not just educate them in early childhood education, but also how to run a business?
So we do have those resources in Nebraska. They are primarily, well, I don't know if that's the right word, but there are significant resources available, business training, all of those kinds of things available through what's called the Nebraska Early Childhood Collaborative here in Nebraska. They work with providers statewide. I would also suggest that this is not about providers not being able to manage a budget, because that is absolutely not the case. We have seen and walked through budgets with childcare providers, and they know what their expenses are. They know what they're required. They're having, for just one example, really big challenges meeting their insurance requirements. And when it comes to liability insurance, they've got to have liability insurance. They have other people's children in their homes, right? It used to be many, many years ago, $20 a month added onto your homeowner's policy as a rider, and you're covered. And then we got closer to COVID. That number, I don't have those numbers in front of me, just increased exponentially. Now we have very, very few options that childcare providers can even choose when it comes to that liability insurance, and the cost has doubled since COVID, right? But none of those things are factored into the way we reimburse childcare. And a provider, if they set their rates, they know what their costs are. If they set their rates based on that, they wouldn't be able to compete with any of the providers that are in their neighborhoods, right? Providers are charging based on kind of what everybody else is charging. And the state is subsidizing at a very, very low rate, not based on costs, but just based on what a family is able to pay and what the market says.
And I please don't hear anything that I'm saying in minimizing the challenge.
Sure.
And it is very different selling bricks and mortar than dealing with families and the challenges that different families go through. The collection items that you mentioned are very real
Yeah.
and happen
Yeah.
in the real world every day. So
Mhm.
I realize it's a challenge, but again, if there's a way to view it from a much higher level, from a systemic
Yeah.
viewpoint, to if there's something that we can do to assist
Mhm.
in that way to change the industry, because I know for a
Exactly.
fact that there are providers that are making a very nice profit doing these things. Now, yes, there may be a niche, they may be at a higher end provider level, and certainly they have to
Probably
again
not
compete
taking any
against the
subsidized
neighbor
childcare.
and so on. So
Yeah.
yeah, some very unique challenges. But again, I would encourage looking at that from
Yeah, it's a
from
great point.
viewpoint
We
where
do-
the industry can be changed.
We want to make sure that all providers have resources, including any kind of business, training and all of
Right.
those things. Absolutely.
Thank you.
It's very important.
Thank you, Senator Von Gillen. Senator Kelly.
Thank you, Chair Linehan. So whenever I hear people saying, well, we just need to put more money into it, and they're not reimbursed enough and the state needs to pay more,
Mhm.
my first thought is, how is the state actually making it more expensive for them to do business? What are the regulations? What are the red tape that could be cut, that could be trimmed down,
Yeah.
that are causing those costs to go up? Because I don't know that we want to say it's the state's job to provide for childcare for every kid. I start getting real hesitant with that.
So I heard a couple of questions. So if I
Regulations, number
forget
one.
something. So one is I'm not sure that it's really the state that's actually making these costs go up through regulations or anything, right? The regulations that we have are really important ones around child safety, health measures, and things like that. They're also not expensive items. This is not what a provider's budget is made up of. Okay, a provider's budget is at least 70% their staff. And then you've got training materials, you've got liability insurance, all of these costs. So in order to meet the regulations, that is a very, very minimal cost to the childcare provider. So I don't think we're going to see any financial savings there. I had another thought. I'm sorry, I lost it based
That's
on
okay,
your
but
question. I
that's the
apologize.
biggest thing that I want.
Yeah,
Look
yeah.
at
So
how we can actually impact
at least
things.
70% of a provider's budget is personnel.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Senator Cal. Senator Poster.
Thank you, Chair Linehan. And I think just to follow up on Senator Cal's question, we had a couple of bills last session that were specifically focused on eliminating either burdensome or unnecessary regulations related to childcare access. One of them went through HHS committee, and we got that passed. And then we had the bill in banking that created some more options and opportunities for various types of creation of childcare providing. So, I mean, I think we're, just so that's part of this conversation, and obviously then in revenue, we've done these tax credits. So I think we're trying to hit it from every direction. It's just a matter of being effective.
Thank
you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Poster.
Did you have a question?
Good to get it directed. Senator Albright.
First, I'd like to apologize for being late. I didn't expect an appointment to go as long as
We're
it
glad
did.
you're here.
So
Thank you.
I'm just catching the tail end of all of this, but when we are talking about the rural areas and the childcare, and my concern in the smaller areas of the state, a lot of these building funds for the schools and they're talking that it's because of the early childhood, when they have the 4-year-olds in the school, the square footage that they need. Who funds? It sounds to me like the public is funding it because they're going out for a bond to expand the size of their school to take on this program. So who actually is responsible if we have this program going on and they have to hire teachers and they have to train them and they have to give them benefits and all the things that go with it? Who's these grants that people have talked about since I walked in? Do they get any money to be put aside to build or to get ready for the number of children that they're going to have coming into their schools?
We should probably maybe ask that question individually based on, every single grant that is out there. I don't want to just lump them all into one, saying any grant that's going out for early childhood is going to operate. But in general, if I try to generally answer your question, the grant funds that go out are intended to pay for the personnel to staff the program that has the interaction one-on-one with the child. So I've seen a lot of communities who, turn to their private sector for kind of the one-time building cost, facilities, that sort of thing.
Where they have an
Usually
existing-
facilities
yeah.
are not built into a grant because again, that's really dollars that are intended to, have that interaction that's happening between the child
Right,
and that.
and I've
provider.
seen where, depending on your income, certain children will go to this program and this facility, this
Yeah.
program and that facility, this program and somebody else's.
Mhm.
Now I've watched it go toward, well, let's just get them all in the school and we'll expand the size of the school based on the number of early childhood children that are coming in. And then it becomes the property tax base that absorbs that. And that's where I have to.
So what I've seen over the last, 10, 15, 20 years is communities trying a lot of different things, which is kind of what you're, saying that you've seen yourself, right? A lot of communities who are calling up different entities across the state, wherever they can try to find a connection to say, help me do more early childhood, because maybe the one provider that we have in our small community, turns 60 in 2 years and we know that she wants to retire and we have to do some planning, right? So a lot of years that communities have been kind of looking around, trying to figure out what the resources are in the state and how they can find something that works for them.
And you have a lot of federal funds. Do federal funds go to the schools to build?
There are a few, and Melody, who was up here with the Department of Ed, did mention some of those as well. Title I, IDEA, some of those funds. It's really not a very large number. Most of the federal funds that come in for our early care and education system are found within CCDF. And then also within Head Start, which has nothing to do with the state itself. That's directly from the feds to the local grantee. The state doesn't have any.
So, and my last question. So these grants, when people ask, like what kind of money? Let's just say it's a community that has 30 children. I mean, are they're asking for those grants for teachers' benefits?
So maybe it depends on, are they applying
training.
for a grant because they want it to go fund, a preschool classroom at the school? And I did know these numbers and I
But
hesitate to throw a dollar
but
amount at you.
Could you allow us as a revenue committee to take a look at what are some of the top 10 reasons that they ask for the money?
Oh, sure.
I just.
I don't know that anyone exactly has a top 10 list,
Okay,
but
okay,
we could
surely there
certainly,
has to be one, there has to.
What we're hearing from communities,
What would be the top
basically.
2 or 3, would you say that they ask for grant funding for? The top 2 or 3?
it's to fund the personnel in the program. It's to fund
Personnel.
yeah, absolutely.
Mhm,
Number one, always.
mhm.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Albright. We're doing that here. I want to just make comment for clarification, just so people know. One of the reasons it seems like the education committee is half the people on the committee are also on education.
Yeah.
So it's,
Yeah.
we do a lot of
I appreciate that.
back and forth. Going back to you and Senator Ron Gillen's exchange, which I think there's a nugget there that we need to pull out. So he said, there are some that are being very successful. They're making money, some daycares.
I imagine there are some. I
Well,
don't
they-
really know any providers myself that
I think
are, but
when we drive, Senator Gillen and I drive here, there's several on
You know-
Highway 31. I can't remember the names of them. They're either franchises or?
I would say probably the zip code has a lot to do with it. And
What
probably
has a lot to do with?
the zip code maybe, right?
Yeah.
The programs that you might see in your district may not look like the programs in Senator
Right,
Albright's
exactly.
district, right?
Exactly.
So that's a big factor. And then are they connected to kind of like a national chain? Or are they
Yes.
really truly a local childcare provider
They're-
who, is kind of serving the community because they grew
One
up in
on
that community?
204th is, I assume, a national change because it's the same daycare my granddaughter's in Northern Virginia.
Not that national chains, I'm not here to say they're not good, right? I mean, the most important thing about a program is the kinds of interactions that they're having with those kids and if they're good quality programs. And so nothing necessarily against national chains.
No, and I'm
but
not saying you
they
are.
probably are not also taking children who are low income. Okay.
That's what I'm
because
trying to
that's
get
when
to.
your budget breaks, because you're not getting the same rate.
So all of this, who are the children and how many of them are not living in Elkhorn or Gretna and not going to, I've been in those daycares, they seem very good to me,
Mhm.
high quality daycare where the parents can afford them.
Mhm.
So where do we have very serious shortages, a shortage, and then those parents are they're doing okay?
Well, if you want, Verse 5 Nebraska's got some great data. So if you want, geographical pockets is kind of what it sounds like you're describing to me of where are those geographical areas where we have many, many more children who are low income who do not have access to the program that you drive by every day.
I think you get farther with the legislature if we focused on that.
Absolutely.
Because to which Senator Kauth mentioned, when it seems like we've got to take care of all of them, the amount of money that would take is outside of our
Absolutely.
ability. So focusing on the real, okay. Then on this, I appreciate very much your chart of the funding here, though it confuses me. I'm
Oh,
not
no.
appropriate. None of
I
us are
tried to make it
appropriate.
really
All the
simple.
appropriators only
I'm
get their own
sorry.
little work. Under Early Childhood Education Endowment Fund, 6 pence. Are you
Yeah.
saying that we general fund 7.5 million to 6 pence every year?
Yes. Well, that was just, so it started small and there have been increases and that is.
But it's
what
in
we're
the
up to now.
mainline budget.
I believe so.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. On your counties where there are deserts, childcare deserts,
Yes.
I've been in a lot of those counties. There aren't very many children there. There aren't very many people there.
And that may be why.
Well,
There is no place for them to have their children. They're not interested in moving there.
that might be the case in some of them, but Arthur, I think that would be hard to, I'm not sure there's even public schools in all of those counties. I don't know.
I don't know that, Senator.
Okay.
I can't
Because
respond to
when you
that.
get that far west in Nebraska, you got people that
Sure.
drive
Yeah,
60 miles to a
absolutely.
job, to a town that has a daycare. Then finally, and this is also for the Department of Ed, I think I already asked him, but I really do let the legislature to have this answer. According to the 23-24 statistics and facts about Nebraska schools, we have 22,460 pre-K children enrolled in this includes non-public schools, but in schools that we think of that the department keeps track of. So that could be a public school, could be a non-public school.
Are you saying preschool?
Right,
20,
preschool, pre-K.
Pre-K, 20 something?
22,460.
Okay.
In kindergarten, the same year, there's 25,278. So we only have 3,000 less kids in preschool, children,
Mhm.
than we have in kindergarten.
Okay.
So are the 4-year-olds, there's an option for most 4-year-olds in the state of Nebraska, right? But I'm guessing the issue is it's only half-day programs. So that doesn't help you if you're a working mom.
Correct. You don't have the ability to, go pick them up of a,
So between you and the Department of Ed, could you find out how many of those are half-day programs
Oh, sure,
and how many
absolutely.
of those are full-day?
I
And
do,
what-
I do think we have seen an increase in more full-day programs, but a full-day program for, school is going to follow the school day and also the school calendar. So even a full day program will not be open during the summer necessarily.
I'm a grandma with
Yeah.
kids in school.
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah.
But
Yes,
it's
but-
a help. It's helpful.
Yeah.
Let's see if there was anything else here. On the CCDF funding, that's all federal.
Uh-huh.
How much is that?
I'm not sure that I have that with me, but I
Okay.
can definitely get it for you. I have it. I have all
Because that
federal
mostly
numbers.
goes to low subsidies, and I know, and it's been brought up here, and I've read it somewhere in last week. We increased from 130% to 185% subsidies for working families.
Right.
Okay, but that's gonna run out when we get through the COVID money. So I think it's one of the agenda items of early childhood to make sure that we keep that at 185%.
Back in 2002, there was a line item veto that actually reduced that childcare eligibility from 185% at that time. So back in 2002, that's where we had eligibility at 185%.
And 2002 is one of the 4 years out of the last 40 years when our revenues were below the year before. So that's why that happened. I mean,
Sure.
legislature can't go into
Sure.
that, so.
Yeah.
But then the problem is, should have got one, anyway.
Yeah, so we should have
Yes.
addressed that long before now.
Yes, 2000, as soon as the money was back up, that
I
should have been
agree.
addressed. Okay, I think that's all I have. Any other questions from the committee? Thank you very
Thank you
much. It was
so
very
much.
helpful. Next. Mr. Quentin Brown. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to testify today. My name is Quentin Brown, QUENTIN BROWN, and I am the Executive Director of Educare Lincoln, a research-based early education program that prepares young children from under-resourced communities for school. I greatly appreciate Chair Linehan's leadership on this issue and thank the committee for taking the time to learn about public and private investments in early childhood education. In 2000, Start Early and the Irving Harris Foundation developed the first Educare school in Chicago to provide early education services to children and families in need. Now there are 25 Educare programs in 15 states, the District of Columbia, and the Winnebago Reservation of the Winnebago Tribe of Nebraska. The Educare Learning Network model is unique. It uses evidence-based practices and quality standards that are proven to advance language, cognition, and build positive social and behavior skills. Every Educare has family engagement specialists on staff to work directly with parents to strengthen their skills as caregivers and educators and help deepen their knowledge of their children's developmental needs. And lastly, every Educare invests in professional development for their educators so they can continue to thrive and provide their best work. Educare Lincoln opened its doors in February 2013, and I am proud to say currently serves up to 189 children birth to age 5, along with their families. Our student and family demographics are extremely diverse. At the close of our 23-24 school year, 45% of our families spoke a language other than English at home. For example, roughly 14% spoke Spanish, 13% Arabic, and 12% consisted of Kurdish, French, and Ukrainian. And because of the service they receive from Educare, 18% of those families reported that child care school arrangements are a lot better. 32% reported that their emotional well-being is a lot better. 44% reported that their child's behavior is a lot better. And 51% reported that their parenting is a lot better. Of our children served, 85% met or exceeded expectations for math development. 88% met or exceeded in social development. 97% met or exceeded in physical development. 89% met or exceeded in language development. 92% met or exceeded in cognitive development, and 89% met or exceeded expectations for literacy development. Educare Lincoln blends public and private funding to provide and sustain our services. We are fortunate to have strong partnerships with the University of Nebraska Lincoln, Lincoln Public Schools, and several other community agencies to empower and serve our families and staff. We're also a proud recipient of a 6-pence grant and receive subsidy reimbursements. And while subsidy rates have yet to reach an amount to cover full care, it is a significant resource for our families and our program. Thank you for the opportunity to testify and share some knowledge about Educare Lincoln. And I'd be happy to do the best I can to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. Are there questions from the committee? Senator Brian Gillen.
Thank you for being here today. I've not had a chance to look through the information you've provided, but I just want to comment. Thank you for measuring what you do and providing those metrics. We quite often get into discussions here that have very soft outcomes or very soft results, and providing these metrics is very important. And congratulations on the
Thank you.
very, very high metrics that you're providing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Brian Gillen. And I'm not trying to be, what do you think your per student cost is? I mean, this is a very nice program, so it's going to cost some money.
No, well, I think early care it should be expensive, right?
Right.
Based on what we do. And I don't like to use the phrase expensive, but the cost for our per child care, depending on the age, because you have fewer children in infantile and more children in preschool, ranges between $20,000 and $25,000.
How young do you take children?
6 weeks.
Oh, okay. So they're going to cost.
They are going to cost.
And you take them to 5?
We do 6 weeks up to 5 years of age.
Okay. And you're basically, are you a private organization or a public organization?
We're a 501c3 nonprofit. And just for clarity's sake, I know we've talked about franchises and all, but I will say the educators across the country are independently run and governed by their own independent board of directors. So Educare Lincoln, while we are similar in design to 24 other educators, we are locally run and governed here in Lincoln.
And there are 3 in Nebraska educators?
There are 4.
Okay.
There's Educare Lincoln here in Lincoln. There are 2 in Omaha, and then there's 1 at Winnebago.
So 1 is in South Omaha, I think, right?
I think so.
Okay.
I know the gentleman that runs it, but I don't know his.
Okay. Yeah. I think I'm pretty sure I know where it's at. And do you get state funding
We do.
through your own appropriation or through?
No. So we have every educator has a partnership with the local school district, i.e. Educare Omaha has a partnership with Omaha Public Schools. Educare Lincoln has a partnership with Lincoln Public Schools. So a number of our children are served as Lincoln Public Schools children, and there are state dollars that flow to us through Lincoln Public Schools.
Okay. And also, again, to Senator Van Gillen's point, this data, which is wonderful because we're revenues, we're all data
It's all good.
geeks. When did you start Educate Lincoln?
Me personally or the program?
The program.
2013.
So you've got children who were there in 2013, who would be in elementary or even high school, maybe not high school, but elementary. Do you track those students to see how much better they do?
So it's funny you asked that. This past summer, we started asking that question. And to that point, we had not. But this year, we're starting a pilot to begin tracking those students.
Okay.
But other educators across the country, not all, but some have started to track that data or have been tracking that data.
I think that's how you win the real fight. Like, it's one thing to say that they're now ready for kindergarten. It's another thing to say they graduated from college. And I know sometime this week, I don't remember, we all got it from a new, I think, university-based group about literacy. Ryan left, so Josh is saying yes. Where they're actually going back and tracking kids like 20 years ago. And I think that's where we need to get so we can prove to everybody what we need to do.
I think the beauty of being a part of the national network of Educare is being able to lean on the data that our sister programs produce. The models across the country are the same. Demographics are different, but the care and curriculum that we provide is consistent across the board. So while we have yet to collect that data here, we feel really good and confident that the data, when it's produced, is going to speak to the same outcomes that our partners have produced.
Thank you.
But I do agree with you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from the committee? Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
And I think I appreciate all of you being here. It's very helpful. Do I want to close? Can I just close from here? It's Friday. It's a football game weekend. So this
Go
brings
Big Red.
the hearing to a close, and I would ask the committee, because we will put a report together after today. So anything you want to include in the report, if you let staff know, or any questions we didn't answer. Thank you all very much for being, appreciate it.
What is it?